Welcome everybody for today's new episode. We are very excited to have my guy on. This guy right here, man. I think the first time I heard of you was when people were just talking about, yeah, Jason, he's a significant guy. He works for Hightower Petroleum, and you were getting the award for the African American Chambers, the Bright Award. Is that accurate? Was it called?
Yeah, I got the Bright Awards.
Yeah, you got the Bright Award, and I think that was the first time I actually seen you in person. And I was just hearing everyone rave about you. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. And one of the things that I like to do is make sure if I know there's somebody to know, I need to know this person. I think it probably came maybe a couple years later until I officially actually got to know you. But this guy is a part of some amazing organizations doing some great things. One in which I'm participating in because of this guy actually inviting me in, and I greatly appreciate him for that. I think that he's going to bring a lot of information to the table that's going to allow you to understand how to really navigate waters that may not necessarily be as traditional as others. I know he has a story that's not necessarily going to be as linear as other people's, which allows you to recognize that not everything goes the exact same way for everyone. He also is a part of a collective group of people that I want to just get their personal experience from, because a lot of people can't say that. And I think that it's something that should be respected and the perspective needs to be discussed. So with that being said, you all know how it goes. Got to get to the most important question. Let's get that right out the way, which is, do you like your job, man?
I love my job. I mean, it's plain and simple. I love my job.
Perfect. And see, y'all know I can't do interviews unless I know for a fact this guy actually likes his job. Otherwise, I'm putting you into a position to potentially stay yourself where you wake up and hate Mondays. We don't do hating Mondays here with these interviews. We try and make people learn ways to not hate Mondays, enjoy their life, because those 40 hours, 60, 80 hours that you're going to work is all a part of your life. You don't get to segregate that. And also, we need to make sure that we bring in you people who are in industries that allow you to live a good financial life. Not necessarily rich or wealthy, because neither one of those things got numbers. But
Right.
people who have numbers that we can actually discuss throughout their industry and allow you to realize what type of lifestyle you can live based off of it. So next question, man. We still don't get directly to, just so you understand, I don't ask the first question being
Right ahead, brother.
yeah. So I'm also not gonna give away your actual position. We gonna get to that in a second. So what was the first profession that you ever wanted to have as a
that,
youth?
I, that I ever wanted to have. So, like,
Yeah.
this is like
It could
all
be
the way
something
back to my
ridiculous.
imagination.
Yeah, it could be something ridiculous.
When I was young, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Hey, that ain't ridiculous.
I even had my grandmother send me to space camp. I went to Huntsville, Alabama for a week, learned about SBRs and all different kind of rockets, did the float walk, all of that. And I wanted to be an astronaut when I was little. That's what I wanted to do.
That's pretty sweet that you actually were able to go off to camp for that. What
Yeah.
what sparked the interest in space and being an
I
astronaut?
saw the commercial.
Commercial.
Like
Commercial.
so many others, I was watching cartoons and they had a space camp commercial, and my grandmother was there with me, and she supported most of my dreams. Even though, might not have had, she saved up and she said, "You're going to space camp." And that's what I did.
All right, that's dope.
So I wanted to be an astronaut early. It was short lived, but that was the first. It was the first.
But see, and man, I don't get to talk about certain points until people bring them up. And so I'm so happy that you said that. Like, it's so important that parents, like, you all have to recognize how powerful it is to invest in that child's dream, regardless of how ridiculous it may sound to you because of maybe your personal aspirations and things that you've seen done. But to have a person step in and say, you know what, you said you're interested, bet, let's get you off to space camp. I don't know if it was an easy financial decision to do this, or maybe they just needed you out the house because you was eating too much food at that age. Either way, yeah, I know how it go. Either way, what made her, if you know this answer, what made your grandmother go ahead and say, go ahead, we're going to get you into that program that you wanted to be in?
So, I mean, my grandmother, she was a business owner, just like my grandfather, and they worked and they were really big into exposure. So, it was as many things as you want to try. I'm going to support that as long as you are trying, because standing still just wasn't an option. So if you've got an interest, I'm going to let you explore that interest. And, you might not hit it, but at least it'll start, crafting and forming how you think. And you'll be able to apply it in some other area of your life. She was really big on that.
Yeah, freaking love that, man. That's special. All right, so I get into this type of stuff. So before we even get to it, because the next question following this one will be us actually getting into details about what you do and that lifestyle. But what turned you off? Like it sounds like you said it was short lived, but what stopped you from becoming an astronaut?
Probably ADHD or something like that. I wanted to do everything. I was a curious kid, so as soon as I picked it up, I was on to the next thing. And really didn't start to narrow down until I got into something that really covered a breadth of what I was doing. But I'm gonna hold off on that because I know you said you wanted to wait a step before you get into what I actually do. So
All right, man, forget it. Let's do it. Let's get it at the same time. All right, man. So go ahead, give them your official title and what it actually means. Because titles tend to be flashy and make people think they know, but they don't actually know.
Okay. I'm the CIO at Hightowers Petroleum Company. I also manage the shared services for Highmark Construction Group, HP Energy Co., and Next Gen Fuel. And CIO can mean a number of different things. It can mean Chief Innovative Officer, but for me, it means a Chief Information Officer. And pretty much what a Chief Information Officer does is all technical aspects of the company, as far as project wise and as far as foresight into development. So I'm going out and I'm shopping for and researching the latest technologies and seeing what's applicable to my company in layman's terms. Uh, it's my job to then, once we discover what way we want to go, engage with certain companies to figure out how we could implement this and start to negotiate the contracts and cost. So in a nutshell, anything that has to do with the infrastructure of my company that has a technical aspect to it, they include me on.
Hmm. Okay.
That's
So
what I do.
mhm,
I said, and that's what I do.
yeah. So I've always really had an interest in understanding where you all find this this actual product that's going to be cutting edge for your companies, because it's always this IT person that either was in a training and they're like, so I just learned about this new thing because I was participating in this organization and we have to get it because we're behind and this organization's already hit. But I'm sure there's another place where there's just a lot of information out there for you all to research and acquire, or you just on a deep web looking for different things. I don't know if the deep web is the dark web. I don't know if that's the same thing, but yeah.
Yeah. It's not, but it's all good. For my industry, it's the same as any other industry. We have share groups, we have trade shows, we have networks. So, like, one group I'm a part of is Evanta. Another group I'm a part of is the CIO Roundtable for the Cincinnati Chamber of Commerce. And just like anything else, it's just about communicating with your peers and seeing what they've heard through the grapevine and then participating in your major tech companies' different events. So I used to go to Microsoft Tech Summit, and there's probably about four of those in the country every year, and then they have them internationally. But you just go there for like 4 days and do nothing but test products, sit in forums from different instructors who talk about the new releases of what's coming out and how to apply it to your business. And so getting out there, doing the networking, it's all the same, from IT to anything I've ever been in, even if it was music, it's just talking, engaging in that community and building upon each, one of those relationships until you get your answers. And then getting your answers and then bringing them back to the people that you were talking to and saying, hey, does this make sense? And if it does, how did you apply it? And then picking that apart and drilling down and drilling down and drilling down until you actually have a solution that's feasible for your workspace.
Oh, okay. Well, I hope this doesn't blindside you, but based off of what you said, how much of your job is sales? Because it sounds like you go off, you learn something, and frankly, you were present for the training. And that's the catch that a lot of people tend to forget is like, I was the one present for the training. I'm the one truly back here seeing what we have and understanding it to the level in which you do. And now I have to go sell it to my company to make them believe that this item, which may cost us several thousands of dollars or more, we need to invest in. So how much of your job is actually sales, and did you get any training for that, or was that just on the fly?
So actually, like that's a huge thing, and I joke about this often that like 50% of any tech conference that I go to, where it's just us sitting in the room and talking about our jobs, is about how to talk to the CEO and the CFO. So like talking to our bosses without making things too technical, being able to put the ROI or the return on investment in front of them and laying it all out to where it makes sense to them. Because oftentimes, if you walk into a room and it's 100% tech talk, the same tech talk that you had with the representative before, that's like a foreign language to the people that you actually have to get the buy-in from. And so you have to break it down. Sometimes it even came down to me saying, this doesn't make sense today, but it will. And trust me, this is the trend, and we need to be on this trend so that we aren't left behind when certain situations like this happen. So, instead of saying, well, if you connect this to this, it does this, and that can get lost in translation often. So, yeah, a big part of my job is selling, or really getting the investment from my C-suite, which is my executive staff, which will be my CEO, my COO, Chief Operating Officer, and my CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, because it all has a cost too. So,
Yes, it
yeah.
does. Yes, it does. All right, so go ahead and it sounds like there's a story there. So I have to ask in the initial thing that we talked about, which is sounds like there was something that grabbed your interest over here and led you down this path for your life. What was that?
So I actually started it like kind of in left field with graphic design. Um, long time ago, I used to be on forums back in the day, even before MySpace. So you had your Black Planet, you had, all of those things. And that was the introduction to me, using HTML, which was actually web development. And, a lot of people were doing it and they didn't know that they were coding. You're coding because you were actually putting the sparkles that fell down, your profile, or you changed your profile picture, or you changed the scroll bar from what it was gray to a custom color. You were a coder back then, and I didn't know that. But that's actually where I got my interest in computers, and I was doing everything on the computer from an early age. My mom, she actually bought me a compact Presario, something back like in '96, and I it, don't tell anybody about this. Just kidding. But actually stole my first copy of Photoshop on LimeWire. That's how old this is. And it took like 6 days to download. But once I got it, it was on. I was just, I'm gonna learn everything about this program, and really even getting on the back end of it just showed me that I had a technical side to me, even though I was messing with the creative. And graphic design really carried me all the way up into the beginning of my career with Hightowers. So that's
Man,
that's how it sparked my interest.
okay, okay. So, man, you give so many different things that I think are so important in one sentence that I have to like dig into each thing. But you mentioned your mom now. Just talk about your family for a second. And because it seems like there's a pattern of investing in the actual future and the family. Because we talking about grandma invested in you, we talking about mom invested in you. I don't know how many other family members decide to invest in you, your cousins, your siblings, or anything like that. So if you got a second, go ahead and just if there's any actual story there, because it's like, why? What's the thought process behind this? Because we know that it's not necessarily something that's very common, but it's extremely important.
Yeah, so I had a huge family, and really the stories are countless. Even all the way up until I moved out to Monroe, where I live now, we all lived off of one long street. So you're talking about six different families within a family that all live off of one main drag in Middletown, Ohio. And there wasn't any one person that I could say invested more other than my grandmother, my grandfather, and my mom. But each and every one of them definitely put something in the pot for me. I currently work with three of my cousins. uh, they have two or three children that I also work with. Before I even got the Hightowers, I was doing political organizing with my cousin Steven, and he put that seed in me. It goes back and back and back and back. But everybody had to be doing something. And if you weren't in motion, then you were kind of like on the outs. And so it was very important to just grab a little bit from this person, grab a little bit from that person. And they always had something to give when you went to grab. My uncle, who is the CEO of Hightowers Petroleum, is well known in Cincinnati marketplace, Stephen L. Hightower. Even when we were little, he was always, poking at us. Hey, you got to learn how to speak. You got to learn how to speak. There's nothing more important than speaking. You got to give a speech. He used to make us line up and give speeches. So like just little stuff. Like every person had their thing, and it's truly a testament. Whoa, it's truly a testament to you know, how much forward thinking came out of our entrepreneurial spirit, because my grandfather started his first company in 1953. So, you know, everybody was working, and then everybody was researching, everybody was going off, sprawling off, living their own life, but they all brought it back in. And me being the youngest kind of my generation, I have a younger brother, but he was kind of born with the generation under me. I was the youngest, I was a baby. Everybody could pour into me. Everybody went out and discovered and could pour back into me. So I was just fortunate for that situation.
Clearly, man. So that's the part where I was like, we have to start talking a little bit about that, because it's not often I get to have this conversation. So if anyone's watching and they want to get into this conversation about Du Bois versus Booker T, because frankly I talk a lot about trades and people doing jobs, opposed to, I'm not one of the people that I hear like you need to be an entrepreneur. Guess what? Not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. Like, we can't work on any of these devices that me and you are doing this without people working inside of a company to produce these things. Not everyone is going to be the entrepreneur. And even in becoming the entrepreneur, you're most likely going to have a job. And hopefully you don't have to hate your life while you're doing the job in order to acquire some of the capital to pay for your next venture. So the average person is going to have a job. And with that being said, I don't interview people who are entrepreneurs, at least at this moment. I will get to them at some point, because I need people to have an actual blueprint that's capable, that anyone's capable of potentially going through and acquiring. Maybe not easy, but been able to do this. Because at the end of the day, an entrepreneur has way too many variables that makes their job not necessarily promised. The restaurant industry, I would love to own a restaurant at some point, but that's one of the most famous businesses that fail. So to act like you're just going to be like, oh, I'm going to have the best tasting food and great prices, so I'm going to win. No, you still can fail as an entrepreneur. So I like talking I like talking to people who are currently in industries that they love doing work for a company and earning money from that company. With that being said, you are a part of a family. Clearly, you work for your uncle, as you mentioned. The company has your name on it. What is it like to be a part of a successful family business?
I can tell you this: it's nothing like what anybody tells me they think it's like. Everybody thinks that it's a lot sweeter than it is, but it's actually a bit more difficult, because when we have to go through our problems throughout the day, if you ever had a heated exchange with a coworker, at the end of the day you can leave and go on about your business. But when we get done, toughing it out and going through the changes, really, we would then be at Big Mama's table at 6:30, eating dinner, sitting right across from each other. So you have to kind of learn how to switch it off. Uh, Even though you're working 24/7, you kind of have to learn how to switch it off when you have those regular, talks like, oh, how was your day, other than seeing me all day, you know. But beyond that, we work harder than anybody else because it's our name on the billboard. I think that, when you've got that sense of pride about where you work because it's connected to your name, and not being an owner, actually being an employee. So, like, I'm a part of corporate America. I'm not an entrepreneur, as you said. I mean, I may be in other endeavors, but for this, I'm a part of corporate America. And, going into work, every day, putting in that amount of effort, and having that billboard say my name, it adds that much more pressure to get it right and get it right the first time and represent. Because right now, Hightower's Petroleum, we're on a global scale. We do fueling all across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and we've even journeyed into Africa with our endeavors. So it really is tougher working for a family business.
I believe it. I absolutely believe it. I mean, you said people expect certain things. I mean, you hear a lot. I mean, when you talk about the Bus family with the Lakers, they talk about a lot of infighting in those type of situations. So I definitely don't perceive it as easy. But I think that you hit something on the head, which is related to, I mean, the importance of seeing your name on there, the legacy, the pride, the fact that it's like this thing has to succeed. Like it's too much connected to me and my family and what we're gonna do in the future. Why would I not invest as much as possible? I mean, that probably also brings a little bit more trust in the times that the person that you're arguing with or having a disagreement with, you trust them a little bit more, regardless about the argument, because it's like this person has the greater good in mind, in theory. I don't know your family and everything going on, but I'm saying in theory, I picture it's like this person sees us as a part of him. It's not really us versus them. And so for that reason, even when they're arguing for us.
Yeah, the thing about trust, though, a trust can, a lot of people apply it to the positive, like, I trust you, so maybe that's a good thing. But, with us, we know everything about each other. We grew up in the same house, so, not only do I trust your strengths, but I trust your weaknesses.
Mhm.
And really having that foresight to know, um, I know where you do well at, I know where you don't do well. That common bond that we all have allows us to perform at a better pace than just, you working with a group of strangers, having to work with each other for a year and then develop that bond. So that's another caveat to it, but trust goes both ways.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Okay, I had to touch on that because it's not many people that can talk about this type of experience and talk about the importance. Because we're in a world right now where, yeah, we're talking about the black dollar, we're talking about black businesses, we're talking about small businesses, especially during COVID, hoping that things are going to flourish and succeed and people survive through these tough times. The eyes are, of course, on big business, but a lot of the conversation on smaller business. I don't know exactly where you all fall. I feel like you all are probably more middle, right? You all aren't necessarily small and you're not like officially big, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Mm,
Message.
yeah. Coming through the computer, man.
All good, all good. That's like back in the day with drinking juice in the hood while don't be a menace while drinking juice in the hood.
Yeah.
Message. um well, so tell me, you said something, so I'm not gonna I remember everything. And one of the things you mentioned was how when you go to certain conferences, when you're doing certain things, you start noticing trends and knowing what trends are on the out, what trends are coming in, and what trends are going to be the future.
Right.
Maybe, and I'm sure like people in the tech industry, the people like yourself, you all tend to, from my perspective, to yeah, you're locked into what's going on for your business, but you're also just really infatuated with technology. So you all tend to learn more about just random things out there connected to your industry. Yeah. So based off your smile, I can ask this question: what
Go
trends
ahead.
do you see in the future, whether it's with your business or not with your business, that's going to impact the world that other people may not be recognizing right now?
So a big thing, big buzzwords in my business is like, and especially if you were paying attention to the election, where clean energy, um, and a lot of people hear it all the time, but they don't understand what it would mean to actually come to a net zero usage of petroleum products. You know, there's an entire infrastructure across the country that would have to be replaced or retrofitted for us to go to 100% clean energy. And what does that look like? Um, right now there are a lot of speculations, but who really knows? And that's when you start looking at the comic books and you see the city of the future and all of those things that you know the car that operates 100% on battery. We thought that that would be something that wouldn't come for what, 50 years. It's
Hmm.
here now, but where do they charge at? Where where where's this infrastructure? It transforms the way the country looks. It transforms the way the country operates. We're talking about smart rail, uh, and I mean, I'm not even getting into the deep, deep stuff. I'm just getting on the surface level of what's been presented to the country. Because if I've been to a DOE briefing, which is Department of Energy briefing, and they're talking about things that really would space you out, like they're talking about black holes. So, and that's why I don't want to discuss things of that nature, because, like you talk about something like a black hole, and they're saying that the periodic table of elements is only 18% of all matter in the universe. And that just like completely blows away everything we ever learned as children coming through school. So, I try not to go super deep off the, deep end, because there's a lot of things that I hear that sound like science fiction. And so it's just about what audience is it relevant to.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely understand that, because I mean, while we always talk about we haven't discovered living life on any other planet beyond ours, like similar to what you're saying. I mean, you find different. I mean, I think they were like launching something out there to take something off a meteor because it was like going to, or asteroid, because it would have gathered so much information from the galaxy over time, and maybe even material like you're talking about that we don't even have on the periodic table. And that's where I come to, like, how do we actually know we're the only living thing? Because who says that the way we define living is the same on every planet? How do we not know that some planets adapted and some things adapted to something that doesn't need trees like we do? That's the Earth's rules, and gravity is the rules
Well,
on
you
our
know,
planet. But
human
everything is different everywhere. We ain't about to get into aliens. You sucked me in like a black hole. I see what you did here. You got me into it.
I heard about an artificial black hole, and when I say the black hole, I mean I'm talking about one that they've recreated here on Earth. So that's what we're actually talking about: artificial black holes here on Earth, not what's deep in space, what they actually have here. Like, a lot of people don't know this. Uh, the DOE actually has super labs throughout the United States, and we're talking about computers the size of football fields. There's like 17 super labs, and that's why they're trying to get a lot of kids into STEM, because we've got kids 13, 14 years old coming up with the next cures for X or the next. And coming from where I come from, that wasn't fathomable. So what they're trying to do is get in front of all these children and let them know that, hey, you can be this by an early age, discovering the next, why, or discovering the next when, or discovering the next who early on. You just got to get engaged so what's possible, because there's a lot more possible than what we are experienced with, especially coming from certain places that we come from, and especially in the Midwest and close to Appalachia. We just don't hear about it.
Hmm. Okay, okay. So taking some steps back,
Go ahead.
we already out of space, so we're not doing the out of space conversation anymore unless you got anything deep. And you mentioned these black holes being on the planet, which is even wilder. got me getting ready to Google something after this.
Yeah.
But outside of that, you hit something that is, I mean, people talking about energy and the types of energy out there right now. That's definitely a conversation. And I drive an electric car. I don't. If I drive an electric car, where am I going to recharge my car while I'm on a long drive, a road trip across the country? Talk a little bit about that. Like, because some people don't necessarily understand how much infrastructure has been invested during a time in which no one's seen the natural resources in which we use in the ways that we see them now, and perceptions on these things. We're just like, hey man, we're making the world better and making life easier through the way that we're doing this and the infrastructure we're investing into this country and practically all the countries around the world. So that's pretty much how the country is set up. So can you talk briefly about like what it would take for our country to be able to, and even the world to adjust to a different power source? And maybe it's easier than I think it is, but I definitely hear what you're talking about with the infrastructure because it sounds like it'd be significantly costly, like expensive or whatnot.
Right. And, just to clarify, I've heard what I heard. I'm not even a subject matter expert on
Hmm.
the matter. Um, it's been told to me that it would take 56 years to, redo the entire infrastructure to where we were at a net zero with oil. But, then you hear the president step out and he puts a timeline that's before then. So
Which
the one thing,
president? Just for
the
the,
Biden,
okay, that's why I asked because I'm like, there's current sitting and uh,
right, right.
like on the way.
But the one thing people have to realize is that everything that happened in technological advances up until like the 80s, I'm talking about since the beginning of time to then, happens every 10, now 5 years, over and over and over again. So it's kind of hard to put a timeline to anything with the way that we're advancing because, like, for example, I went to Micro Center the other day and I wanted to buy, a thumb drive. Used to could get like a 1 gig thumb drive for like 15 bucks. They don't even sell them anymore because, just how far we've gone with storage. There was a company in Dayton that was a data center. It was the size, it was many acres, and the amount of storage capacity that they had on that acreage would now fit in a small room. So like I said, we're growing in leaps and bounds unlike ever seen before. So to even call it at this point would just be speculation, 100%.
Makes
But
sense.
people are thinking in that direction, so it's coming.
How's 5G going to impact what you do? Do it has like it going from 3G to 4G to 5G? Has that impacted your industry and the how has it impacted technology as a whole? Because if I'm honest with you, I got one of those. I'm not gonna say the brand anymore because I ain't getting paid to be
Right.
promoting it. So I have one of those products that was connected to slowing down their products.
Right.
Whenever a new thing was coming around to try to get you to buy a new one, they said it was more just to try to make sure the processor, whatever. Uh, so if I'm honest, I've never really seen a big difference between 3G, 4G, 5G. I feel like I've always waited the same amount of time. I might not have. So,
Well, it seems like that,
mhm.
but only because you've went from 3G to 4G to 5G, like, and so on until whatever, because the bandwidth that you needed to run an iPhone, the very first one, isn't the same as right now. So they're building to make the experience faster, which, it's catching up to itself because, like back in the day, why would I ever need a terabyte hard drive for? you know. Oh, but now I got two and three.
Two.
You know what I'm saying? Like at most our files used to be in kilobytes, and that's this big to a terabyte, which I can't even stretch my arms wide enough. So it doesn't seem like it makes a difference just because we just continue using. But actually, if we had to use what we're using today on that bandwidth back then, we wouldn't even be able to use it. So when you ask like how will 5G benefit me, It just gives me more bandwidth, and possibly gives me, depending on how they build out the network, a greater ability to connect to devices in remote places. Because we do a lot of site work, where we do like fueling at sites that may be, it may be a cell phone tower up in a mountain. How do I connect to that if I don't have a physical wire? By satellite or by cell tower service. So if I get faster download speeds, then that means I get more real-time data. And when I get more real-time data, I can paint better pictures for my executive team. That's how 5G changes things. That's how the next G changes things, and so on and so on, until we no longer create at a bandwidth that we can catch up to the speeds that we're downloading at and operating at.
I guess you make a valid point. I realized I wasn't watching Netflix or whatnot. Like, or nothing like
You
that.
were streaming 4K movies back in 2000. So,
Yeah, touche, touche. So I guess things have changed, and so that makes sense. So as we talk about your actual industry, man, I feel like your industry and your job is obviously one of those industries of the future, obviously the industry of the present, and one in which pretty much every business out there is going to need somebody with at least some level of understanding somewhere around yours, maybe not your highest level because you're obviously in the C-suite, but still, there's going to be somebody that's needed in the actual IT department, information, like those type of those departments and whatnot, because it's going to help them stay on top of their game, produce probably a little bit more efficiently and as effective as possible. So, can you talk about some of the other organizations that your degree and your skill sets could transfer over to if you were to potentially say, all right, I'm going to go to and work for a different company, a different business, which right now I don't really see a major value because they don't have your name on it.
right. But if I was going to go to another company and work in any other capacity, like in the technical space, I would probably have to go study for 6 months.
Really?
And the reason why I said that, I just painted a picture of how technology changes. And, we're doing everything we've ever done in history again, 5 years. So
Mhm.
if I took 5 years and I stayed in one space, to jump into another space, I'm fresh. Do I have the skill set to actually maneuver and navigate that space? Have I heard some of the terminology? Yes, but I would probably have to, pick up a book, which most people don't do anymore. Okay, let's pick up a tablet and, go to Audible or go to Coursera and, take a certification and, jump back into that space. And what that does is it tells people out there that you're not that far off of me from jumping into this space. If I've got to go back and study, we're actually like here and here, other than the network and the ties and, the education outside of technology. We're neck and neck.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's one of those things where you have to continuously put your study down and evolve with. Um, but yeah, I mean, go ahead.
So how do you're making good points, especially knowing that the industries out there, all of the industries that have some type of technology connecting to them, is requiring that people who are vets in the game and been in these industries for so long constantly stay up to date because there's a young kid right now that's grew up with this technology, plays with technology that you're using inside of your company just because, just like you at a younger age, had an interest and infatuation. So they're coming out of high school already prepared to at least touch some of the technology, maybe not read it the same way or understand the business the way that you do, but they're ready once they get that information downloaded into their brains from whatever way of acquiring information they need to, whether college or trade. I definitely think that there's that constant area in which you have to always be learning. So how do you I mean, it sounds like you have organizations that you're connected to, but how do you fact check and confirm that what you're using is not dated? And how do you always try to stay ahead or at least with the pack as in the technology updating as it comes?
So, being in a technology leadership position, I find the areas that are, the education most affects where I'm at. Like I just did, some data analytics, just because it's helping me paint the picture for my company. I took a course with Duke through Coursera, got a certification in that. But like you said before, the network is what tells you. I'm a part of a CIO roundtable. I've got 6, 7 companies around that table, and they're continuously feeding me what's important in industry on a diverse array of companies, and I'm able to then take that information and consume what I can, consume what I must, and discard what I can't, and move forward.
And that's important right there. The point of information sharing, having people out there that is and being a part of organizations who essentially understand your perspective, what you're going through, and can inform you in advance. Hey, man, you might want to get on this right now. This is what we've been doing all the time, but we don't want to be out of date and get left behind. So that's definitely cool. Can you go ahead? Let's get to the part in which you break down your path to where you are now. So I don't know if that's starting coming into college, but if there's something important that happened in high school or earlier, feel free to include that in your path.
Okay. So like I said, I had to start in graphic design. I had an internship. I was at Miami University, doing graphic design and political science, as a major minor. So I was in the political space and also in the graphic design space. I stuck more with graphic design. I had a few positions in between where I landed at Hightowers, but they weren't really relevant. They were, like you said, jobs to get by, jobs to pay the rent, and jobs to definitely put food on the table. I moved back to Middletown in 2010 and joined my family's company, and they really kind of sat me down and they said, I don't really have a seat for you. Come in, we'll give you an opportunity, to, get in where you fit in essentially. And if you don't fit in, then you'll be out. And so I said, well, what are my skills? And I had this skill of graphic design. I had a computer in my hand since the beginning of time. And, I sat in that seat and I started working on the marketing materials. And in working the marketing materials, I got to build my business acumen because I actually got to talk to vendors. I actually had, the back and forth, with the board. Uh, and well, there wasn't a board at that time, but what we called a board, which was, pretty much our roundtable and, discussing, what initiatives were coming up and what needed to be done. And, I sat in that seat for probably about a year or two. And every time something broke, I got called. Like, just because I had touched so many different technical things before, I pretty much became the in office tech support, even though we had a MSP, which is a managed service provider, who would send somebody. And I was also in direct communication with that person so much that they just had me start managing that process of, if the tech guy needs to come here, you handle the tickets, you handle the calls, we'll shuffle everything through you, and this can be another added point. Now, as far as progressing from that point to where I am now, I actually did go back to school. I went to ITT Tech and picked up an NSA degree. I said, and that's Network Systems Administration. And I said, if I'm going to be sitting in the seat where I'm going to be managing, different aspects of the technical infrastructure and how we're working with our managed service provider, then I'm going to understand the Active Directory, or pretty much where we set up all of our employees, or I'm going to understand, how this connects to that. And we did everything in an NSA degree, from like I said, working in Active Directory to, breaking down, a phone cable and, putting a new top on one. And, I'm using layman's terms so, everybody understands.
Perfect.
Um, but, I got that NSA degree, and my roles and responsibilities started to expand. And I started actually working on the networking side and the systems administration side, and became an IT project manager. So now all technical projects, I started to go out and shop and go out and discover, oh, we need a new printer. Show me the bill. Let me shop 3 printers because these printers that we have in office have this certain amount of spend on them, and I think we can do better. Or the phone system. I think we can get a new phone system. So let me go shop these phone systems. And in doing that, I started picking up the terminology. I started, furthering my relationships and my network with the vendors in the area to the point where I had amassed a list of, a company that could cover any area or aspect of the business. And that put me in a position really to manage the entire infrastructure because there was no one else to do that. And you find that so very often in these mom and pop shops that, it is one guy. And that one guy can be you, but, how do you take it to the next level? And that's what I was always interested in. My company, we actually used to go to a show, and we still do actually. It's called the National Minority Supplier Development Council, and that's NMSDC. We have an Ohio MSDC as well. But going there, I used to see at least like 30, 40 rows of companies, and how, these are all minority companies for the most part, except for the majors that actually come there to work with diverse clients. But I got to see, oh, we can achieve this. We started off in a 10 by 10 booth, and now we have a 20 by 32-story booth. So, it was just always about expanding on that skill set and taking those little pieces that I would get. Um, to say the most important skill that you have to have in it would be critical thinking, because it doesn't stop when you get your first problem, and you don't have a solution. You just have to come up with the solution. And that's really, really how I got to where I'm at as the CIO, which that title was given to me only 3 years ago from IT project manager. So just sitting in those seats, absorbing as much technical knowledge as possible, actually going back to college and expanding upon that technical knowledge, and then applying it, continue to apply it, and grinding and grinding and grinding in that space until you are the knowledge center for technology for that company that you work in. And from there, the rest is the rest.
Okay. Man, I like when I talk to minds like yours because when we talk, I always end up hearing more things that I find as trends in these interviews. And one of the things that you brought up was the importance of taking on skills, like knowing your skills and developing your skills in a way that's going to be transferable for your business, whether or not it's a family business or not, and whether or not you took a linear road. What can be said is there's somebody right now watching this that is currently in a position at a company that they love and would love to grow in the company, but hate their current position. And what they can gather from you is the fact that, all right, I was in a similar, well, you weren't necessarily in a role you hated, but you were working in a company and you knew you could have been optimized, like you could optimize your skills in a different way, but you had to go and develop them in the process while knowing, in theory, at the time, what the company needed to get better. But you needed to know this information as well intellectually in order for you to be able to provide that value to your company. Can you talk a little bit more? I know it sounds like it's ingrained from the family in general, but can you develop a little bit more on, I guess, I know you mentioned trainings, but are there any other things that you've done to develop skills? And are there any things that you've done to learn the skills that you have? Like that's two different questions, and I know that. But a lot of people right now are like, I don't know what my skills are, which is the number one challenge for some people. And then going off and developing that. So can you do me a favor and speak on that?
So definitely, I had to sit down and, map out what were my skills in the very beginning. And, like you said, for some people that's difficult. For some people, they know what they can do well. And just doing that well day in and day out, and just adding a little piece on to the top of that and it's adding another piece onto the top of that until, you are something else. You become another, professional. But and I think another major uh, development for me was actually participating in a forum like Cincy Next. So I was on Cincy Next Class One, and I actually signed up to be in Sea Change. And for anybody that doesn't know, these are professional development programs with the Cincinnati Chamber of Commerce that are geared towards just growing you as a professional and nothing else.
Class
Um,
14 is the best, by the way.
you said what?
Class 14 of Sea Change is the best, by the way.
Oh, well, I wouldn't know because I haven't done Change. But did you do Sea Change?
Yeah, that was my class. That
Okay,
was
yeah.
last year. That was last year. That was
So
2019.
my cousins, like, they had done Sea Change, and so I felt like, okay, I'm next in line, and I was in there and got a call like, you're not going to be in Sea Change, and I was like super upset. But then they said, because we're going to start something else called Cincy Next, and it was professional development without a project. So I was the project. It was 100%, learning about myself. And one of the first things that we did when we stepped in there was the DISC assessment. And in doing the DISC assessment, DISC, uh, it pretty much is a professional barometer about your behavior. It tells you how you behave and how you act in a professional setting, and how to communicate with others that do not behave and act the way that you do.
Mhm.
So doing that DISC assessment and really actually taking it to heart and reflecting on it allowed me to grow exponentially within my professional space, because anybody that's in corporate America knows that it's more of a marathon than a sprint. And if you go in there like, okay, I got the new promotion today, I'm gonna get the next one next year. Doesn't happen like that. Like, you get one and you got to tough it out. They hired you to be in that position because they want to see you there, and in order to outgrow that, that may be a couple years, especially if you just jumped in it. So, just figuring out how to deal, how to manage on those plateaus of time in corporate America, allowed me to excel. Because otherwise, if you don't reflect about your own behavior and say, hey, maybe I am an introvert, or maybe I'm extrovert, maybe I'm burying this person next to me with my communication behavior style, or maybe I need to lift this person up, or maybe this person is the catalyst of a project, but I can't depend on them to grind it out. And you start learning and developing those skills, that's how you grow. That's how you grow and elevate. The knowledge is one thing, but managing yourself in your movements within a company, that's the other part.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, these conversations get to my core, because it gets deep into people really being able to assess themselves, learn more about themselves in order to become the version of self that they desire. That's often what we struggle with, is the fact that we look in the mirror and we know that we could be better, but we don't necessarily know how. I want to also include Strength Finder as a good tool. It usually you get the book, and trying to see if I, well, yeah, Strength Finder. There's other books in that family that allow you to do that same little what is it called? I was about to call it a training.
Personal assessments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it allows you to do that assessment. And that is one of those things I think that helped me, because you start to see certain things, you answer it as truthfully and as quickly at the same time. That way you don't allow your brain to process and like trick yourself like this is the right answer and click that instead of your right answer.
Right.
And that's what people have to also acknowledge, is don't try to be something you don't want to be. That's generally what these assessments are trying to pull out of you. And frankly, in the process of you trying to discover who you are, if you lie to yourself about what you're actually interested in because you think that that's going to be the most cost efficient job in the future, if you decide to convince yourself that you love the idea of becoming a doctor and you can't stand blood in reality,
Right.
And it's like, well, that was a waste of your time and not something you should have pursued. I think that that's why the conversation about Mondays and people being passionate about what they do it hits so home for me, is because people struggle with discovering themselves, and at the same time they struggle with developing the self that they actually are in order for it to be the best version that they need it to be. So what are some I like that. What are some of the indirect things that have helped develop your skills? Whether it was a coach, was like, did you have any mentors that really locked in on you and said, "Hey, man, I need you to do this"? I know you mentioned your uncle stressing the fact that you need to be able to speak well, but I don't know if it was solely in the family. That's absolutely fine. Or if you had any mentors outside of the family that helped develop your skills.
So, I mean, in the past, uh, Black Middletown in the '90s was chock full of mentors, and because my grandfather was who he was, I knew each and every one of them. So they gave me the game early, and I had a lot of what they call emojis. So I had a lot of people that really put their hands around me and help mold me, and that was early on. Later on, I searched for them. I searched for mentors, and really they're harder to find these days. um, which is it's kind of tragic, but it is the truth, especially finding ones that look like you. You often have to go outside of those that look like you to find quality mentors willing to give their time. And that's not a knock on us, because there are a lot of us out there giving our time and mentoring down, but I'm just saying it's been a lot more difficult as of late than it used to be when I was coming up. um, One of the big things that I think I've done was executive educations. I did executive education at Dartmouth, which was Tuck, and Tuck Executive Education. We went to Dartmouth's campus. It's an Ivy League college, and spent an entire week waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning and going until 6 o'clock in pretty much the evening, and learning things that we never would have learned, and stretching our brains, not so much to retain everything, but to say, hey, we went through this grueling amount of education together. And through that, most of the people in that class were older than me. And they still, contact me today, ask me how business is going, ask me how things are going, ask me if I need anything, and then asking if we can interface in any way. Programs, really. Programs exist in a lot of forms and fashion. And while they may not be that extreme, I mean, because that's a pretty extreme one and actually has a cost that can actually be covered by a grant. So if anybody's interested in looking at that, and they're in their professional, career, been in it for a while, look into it. But there are programs that exist all across the spectrum. It doesn't have to be that deep, but people put together experiences for people to develop under. Take advantage of them. That's what I did. That's what I do for mentorship, really.
So, people, I hope you all have caught on to the fact that this guy clearly is an avid learner, and he's constantly acquiring as much information as going to allow him to grow. And what do we say? We say that if you want to earn more, you got to learn more. And that's where we have to talk about how education isn't something that just ends. Like when you like, because it's funny. I remember growing up where I grew up in Cleveland, and I remember the immediate thought of many people was like, I graduated high school. I'm done. And then you go to college and it's like, I graduated college. I'm done. And then I went and got my master, and it's like, oh, I gotta keep learning, because all the stuff we learn, and they coming out with new editions for these books, and Pluto used to be a planet and now it's not. There's things that are constantly updating, and without information and without understanding of this information, then you really feel behind. I mean, you can't take an attorney from the 1600s, say 1650, and bring him in, not 1650. I'm way further now.
Yeah.
Attorney from
Going on with
1850 and put him here in 2020. And unfortunately, it clearly was a him because of the way the country was structured and how that whole thing was going, most likely in 1850. Why? Because he don't realize that two dudes talking on screen ain't about to be owned by nobody. Like, and that's where it's like everything changes, time changes, information changes, and you have to always stay up to date in order to be the best and at the top of your game. And I definitely appreciate you breaking down a lot of the tools you've used, a lot of organizations you've tapped into. And I'm just curious to know, man, your CIO, what's the goal? Because you're clearly young. I know people may see the gray, but
Yeah,
you
I'm
aren't as old
33.
as the gray reflects. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I'm young. And to
if you
really
can share what's the goal, if you can share what the goal is.
um, for me, I don't have a goal. I'm working to pass the time. Um, I see people coming to my office and as new employees is 50. And I had to learn a while ago that in this lifetime, I may have to reinvent myself, again and again and again and again. If I put a goal behind where I'm at, which is, essentially for a lot of people, a mountaintop to get CIO of a company doing 200 and 400 million dollars in annual revenue, you know, what kind of goal would that be? It stops being about position and starts to be about, evolution. I don't care to set formal positional goals as far as income or as far as title or as far as me jumping from this firm and going on to this firm. My goals are, to learn, to consistently learn and be able to apply it so that I will always be self sufficient. And that doesn't matter if I'm with Hightowers. It doesn't matter if I'm with JP Morgan Chase like I was. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I want to be in a space to when I get to when it's time to enjoy my life, at which I'm not saying I'm not enjoying the journey, but when it's time to stop so much focusing on what earns the bread that, I have enough to eat and not just saying I have enough money to pay for everything that's going on, but I have enough to eat in every, aspect of my life. Spiritually, I have enough to eat. Mentally, I have enough to eat, and just I live a well-rounded life. And that's really my goal at the end of the day. And, a lot of people they look at me like I'm crazy when I say that, but that's just my honest truth. A lot of the things that people find important are very trivial to me. So
Would it be fair, and it may not, but would it be fair to say that you may have achieved way more, way faster than you expected, which makes the goals you're talking about not necessary because it's like you're adjusting, like you said, you're always evolving, you're always preparing for the next thing. And it's like to do that may put a limit on yourself because you've already shown yourself that you can achieve more in a quicker time period than say the average person.
I mean, I've seen it. I've seen people who make me look like a dud. You know what I'm saying? Like I've seen it. So what's obtainable, what's achievable. You start setting goals. The only reason you set goals is to get in motion. It'll get to a point where you've set and cracked through so many goals that you're still pushing forward. You're still chugging forward, at a million miles per hour, but it's less about the goals. You're just seeing what you can do, and that's where I'm at. I'm seeing what I can do. And it's not about accomplishing any one thing. It's just about living this life until, this life has no more life left to live.
So you have no BHAGs, no big, hairy, audacious goals? I'm sure you have to have a couple.
My goals, I mean, I have a couple, but they don't lie within corporate life. And
Okay.
just trying to stay on topic with that,
I got
like my goals, like like I talk to my guys in iRise all the time. I have goals with them. I have, goals of, amassing a portfolio. But why? Legacy. I would like to leave a good legacy behind. Not that, I feel like that's super, super important for me, but it's super important if it'll inspire somebody else. Um, like I said, this life you only get one, or so they tell us. And while you're here, you have a set of tools, and why not see what you can do with them? Why not see what you can get away with? Is what I often joke with my best friends. Like if we got this one life to live and we've got this brain and we're fully functional and we're capable, even those who have less capabilities than us, they still have a shot. They have a chance, a choice to make every day to see what they can pull off. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can get away with while we're here. Why not?
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you bringing up the conversation about legacy because in this time period, a lot of people are thinking about their legacy. I mean, in these tough times, people are trying to preserve and are getting a little bit more conservative about their finances. But it's also bringing out the awareness that we need to have multiple streams of income. We've mentioned that you're part of the family business. You keep bringing up your grandfather, and so I can't just walk away from this conversation and have never allowed you the opportunity to talk about how the family business came about. How was it built? At what point in time in history and to where it is now? Because you all also have several. It's not just petroleum, Hightower Petroleum, but there's other businesses that you all have as well.
Right. And there's a video about it. There's a couple of videos about our company history on our High Towers Petroleum Co. YouTube, but I'm not going to give you the long version, and that's why I'm saying if you want to hear the long version, visit the website. It's hightowerspetroleum.com. But the short of it, as short as possible. My grandfather and grandmother, they met in Uport, Mississippi, and they came here at an early age. And my grandfather worked in the steel mill, and my grandmother was actually in the administrative offices for AK Steel here in Middletown, which is a really large steel mill. Um, Here in Southwest Ohio. While my grandfather would work 12s, he would get off and then detail cars for another 6, go to sleep, and then do it all over again. So that man was a workaholic. Um, he took his passion for cleaning and started Hightower's janitorial service. And in having that, he, went to a set of law offices and banks. And, he went everywhere, pretty much knocking on every door saying, "Can I get a contract? Can I get a contract?" And got 100 no's until he got a yes. And he jokes, he says that the guy told him it'll be your butt and mine if you mess this up. And he said, "All right." And, he put together a team of which consisted his kids, his wife, everybody played a part, and they grew that business until it was a pretty substantial size. And then a guy from Toledo came down to buy it. He sent him on his way. He came back 2 more times until he gave him an offer they didn't want to refuse, and he sold the company. After he sold the company, my uncle Steve and my grandfather went into business in landmark construction, and they did commercial construction, general contracting jobs uh, under that imprint. And they were actually a part of the minority, state jobs list, the set aside list for jobs, and it included everything from the delivery of beans to all the way over to fuel one day. So the entire state of Ohio contract came up under that set aside, and there wasn't a minority company to fulfill that space because there weren't any African American or whatever fuel distributors in the space at the time. And so um, they partnered with Likens Co. And they actually took the state of Ohio contract from BP. And so you're talking about day one having to figure that out. They took on the contract for all the fueling sites in the state of Ohio, municipalities, police, school buses, everything in the state of Ohio. And they were able to do that job and continue to grind and do that job until they were able to get into another space. And then they were able to get into another space. And we went into automotive. We went into utilities with Synergy, which then led to us being brought along into Duke. And, it just ballooned. Um, a decade later, my uncle being a serial entrepreneur, these other companies, just came to fruition out of different problems being presented by our customer base. And so we always held true to the construction. That never went away. But then we also started in the energy efficiency space because, there was a big talk about energy efficiency and renewables. And, my uncle always had the mind to be recession proof, to be future proof. So if there's a space that may take this business into a decline, we're going to be in that space that takes it the other way as well. And so, that's really the story of Hightower's Petroleum's, evolution from Hightower janitorial to Landmark to Highmark to Hightower's Petroleum Highmark to HP Energy Highmark. And then we also had, a women owned, they're not a subsidiary, they're actually independently owned, Next Gen Fuel, that does the same thing as Hightower's Petroleum, that we kind of mentor in that space. So it's just a natural growth and evolution of continuously being present, continuously throwing yourself into spaces where not a lot of you are, and growing and evolving to those problems and listening to the chatter in the room as to what's the next, and not being afraid to latch onto it.
Yeah, man. Well, I definitely appreciate that. I felt that I would be doing a disservice if I didn't allow you to speak on the family business, the history. Also, I don't believe I heard the year. Can you give like the year in which it started?
So the cleaning service was started in the 50s. I had to give you an exact year. I believe the petroleum business started in the early 80s. The year is often debated whether it's one or the other. So, like I said, if you want to know the exact dates, I'm gonna send you to the video, or maybe get you a pamphlet or something,
I got,
because
I got, I got
we talk about it all the time, but it's just one of those numbers.
no problem. No problem. All right. Well, man, I definitely appreciate your time today. It's been a really great and fun interview, in my opinion. I don't know how it was for you, but it was for me.
Had a
And
great time. Yeah.
do you have anything that you would like to leave as like your final thoughts?
I mean, I say this everywhere I go. If you're the mother of children, if you're the father of children, and you undervalue exposure for them, get them exposed to as many things as possible, even if it takes you out of your comfort zone, because you may be creating the next, you know, name your hero. You may be creating that. And all that comes from exposure. So many lives we lose due to being in a bubble, being, self-contained. We need to break these kids out of that. They need to see that they can achieve, and achieve at certain heights that we never thought fathomable at an early age. They could be leaving high school, you know, with the same amount of knowledge as somebody who has spent their entire life toiling over, this one thing. And exposure is important. So definitely get those kids out there, and get yourself out there too. Don't be afraid to network. Don't be afraid to network, because, a lot of people think that they'll be called stupid, or, they don't feel like they belong in certain spaces. I used to struggle all the time with, saying, why me? Until I had to flip that and say, why not me? If this person called me for this opportunity, why not me? Turn that switch on in your life, and, start to participate, and don't be afraid to fail, because that's all a part of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So my final things I had to stress to you is the fact that during this interview, we talked to a man who is connected to legacy, not just the idea, to actual legacy. And it requires you right now, if you're not already building that, to begin doing that, because it takes one person to make the first move. Bring in that family if possible, and allow you all to grow. Give it time. You may not see it during your lifetime, but as long as you instill it in your children, your nephews and nieces, you will see that they, as time goes on, can build their own empire, their own legacy that you can be proud of, that they can be proud of, and that their kids can be proud of. Today, I must stress to you, I know we talk about you can't be a prophet in your own land sometimes. Well, why not? Give them a chance. I know you knew them since they were children, but as you see, when it comes to recognizing that this person that was once a child is now an adult, there was some information they may have acquired that I was not present for, but I helped invest in them acquiring, and they went and got even more separately. I can respect them as who they are, not just as what they were. So I appreciate you all's time. I appreciate your time. I hope you all got everything out of this that helps you to not despise Monday. So like that, 2 of these. Woo! I appreciate that, bro.